Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It's been a pretty decent or pretty good weekend. This is the last weekend or leading up to Thanksgiving. So, pretty excited. Some family coming into town and always, I don't know, I've always been a big fan of the holidays. So, again, that is always tied in with movies. The biggest movie for me around kind of the Thanksgiving season is The Godfather, and I've talked about that movie many times. I've done probably I know I've done more than one show about The Godfather, which of course was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, and it's my favorite movie of all time. It's funny when that comes up every now and then, if I'm talking to somebody, and we're like talking about favorite movies or favorite bands or just, things that we just really love. And a lot of the times that will come up. And people are usually kind of surprised by that choice of mine. Because I think, well, one thing that I've come across a lot, which I'm always surprised by, is the amount of people that I've met, just over a brief period of time that have never seen The Godfather, and I'm always like, wow, like you gotta. This one girl that I started to get to know for a little while, we were talking about movies and some TV shows and whatnot, and it had come up about some of your favorite like interests, and I had said The Godfather, and her first reaction, and she's like, maybe it's a generation thing, but her first reaction, I know she's like 26 or 27, but her first reaction was, "Oh, is that a TV show? Is that something I can stream? Where is that available?" And I was like, "No, no, no, it's way before any of that stuff has ever come to be," and on top of that had never heard of the movie. So, which I don't know, I get it and I don't get it, but I just find it's funny. Like I worked for a while with this woman who was like, she was pretty young. She was like 21, 22. And she, we talk about music, and she was into country and she was into rock music. And she had never heard of Led Zeppelin and never heard of Black Sabbath. But I was really taken aback that she had never heard of Led Zeppelin before. She's like, "Who's that? Is that a new band?" And I was always like, "Wow." So in my head and also in my world, that's what I equate that to. Of like, I think both of those two things are culturally incredibly important. And I think if someone is a fan of, say, rock music or music in general, but especially rock music, and if you say, who's that? Led Zeppelin? Who is that? Is that a new band? Where are they from? If you have that reaction, I'm kind of like, I kind of check out at that point. Even if and you could say it's a generational thing, but I don't know. I've met a lot of kids. I used to work with exclusively. I used to work a lot with a lot of teenagers when I worked at the teen center, and a lot of the kids I was always surprised knew were listening to lots of music, older music that was not part of their current generation, and so I was always surprised by the stuff that they were into and that they were open to. And I think when it comes to film, it's if you say you generally like movies and that you're a film fan, and yet you have no idea what The Godfather is, or I kind of check out at that point. I just yeah, it's easy to miss certain things. There's been lots of films and things that I have discovered where I feel like I was late to the game, and I'm like, then I finally see it or listen to it, whether it's a band or in this regard a movie, where I was so late to the game to actually seeing it, and I kind of like kicked myself because I'm like, what was I? Why the heck did I not see this sooner or listen to this? But that being said, usually when that happens, it's something that I had heard about, you know, throughout the years in some to some form of capacity. You know, that happens sometimes. You just there's a lot of things out there to kind of check out, and then we get inundated with things, and so it's easy to kind of like to kind of forget about something or oh, this is something I wanted to check out, but then you get sidetracked. That's understandable. Like that can happen, and that happens to me pretty regularly around films. But I think it's a different thing if you've never heard of it. I think that's a little bit. I don't know because I don't know. I feel like those two things are examples of like essential, you know, really high, watermarks in those art forms, but they're essential. It's kind of like the holy bible of those respected styles. But anyway, so I have been doing a whole series of where I've been covering all of the Martin Scorsese movies. One of my favorite directors of all time, and the whole thing on how this whole kind of excursion wasn't, and well, everything's an experiment, but the whole reason that I decided to come up with, you know, the idea, or I ended up coming up with the idea of covering all of the movies of Martin Scorsese. The thing that really inspired it was going to see his latest movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, which is a really incredible movie, and I definitely recommend people to check it out. But I will say, uh, go to it, but realize it is a pretty serious time investment. It's pretty long. It might be, Scorsese's films, movies like Goodfellas, Casino, Gangs of New York. There's quite a few of his films that are, I look at them as being these kind of epic tales, and some of his films, he's an incredibly ambitious filmmaker, and so a lot of his films are pretty lengthy. They're pretty long. Some are maybe a little bit longer than others, but most of his films are, they will, the characters in certain films, you will see them or follow their lives throughout decades. The Casino, Goodfellas are perfect examples of that, of where some of the main characters in those films, like it's basically a character study of these films throughout their journey in life, and it can span up to 3 or 4 decades. So he has this epic kind of nature to his films. So lengthwise, it's not really anything new. I do think, and I think Killers of the Flower Moon is part of that, of his epic film, epic way of telling stories, and he always obviously harkens back to the classic way filmmaking was made. Films that like examples of like films like Giant, or John Ford films, where they're epic in scope. They tend to be pretty lengthy, but they're just and they're obviously movies to be that are meant to be seen on the screen, on the big screen, but they're these epic tales. So it's not really anything different, but I do think the Killers of the Flower Moon is maybe a little bit longer than his other films. I know when it comes down to the actual length of films, The Irishman is that's an incredibly long movie. I think that might actually be his longest film. It's almost like a miniseries. It almost feels like it. Of course, that was a Netflix production. The Irishman is an incredible movie. That was his last studio film before Killers of the Flower Moon. I've only seen The Irishman once, but I got to see it again. But it's an incredible movie. But I do think that, I don't know, I kind of think, I don't know the exacts, I haven't checked the times, but I kind of get a sense that Killers of the Flower Moon might be actually a little bit longer. But that being said, it's still an incredible experience. It's very dark and it is it's very powerful. It's kind of a depressing movie. Well, it's a very depressing movie. So it's in that regard, it's a little bit unrelenting, but it's a must see. So anytime I've come, it's come up in conversation or I've talked about Killers of the Flower Moon. I did a big review of it, like a day after I saw it. I definitely say, be forewarned, or maybe that's a strong way to say it, but know that if you go see it in the theater, it's an undertaking, and you will be there. If you see it during the daytime or you see it at night, your whole day and whole night is going to be at the theater because it's definitely a full on experience. And I remember when we saw it, I saw it with a friend, my friend Aaron Kirkpatrick, and we saw it in the mat. I think we saw it like at I think we saw it was like a 2:30 show, and so technically, midday, mid early afternoon, kind of lunchtime period. And I remember we bought snacks and a bunch of popcorn, one of those jumbo popcorns, and I remember not I didn't really eat all that much before during the day, but I ended up eating my weight in popcorn and candy. And so it was pretty funny. And then by the time we got done with the movie, we ended up going out to dinner. And by the time we went to dinner, it was like 7:30, quarter to 8. So it was an undertaking, but it was so well worth it. I'm very excited. I really want to see it. There were some sound issues, and I'm not sure if it was the movie itself or the theater. It was there were parts of the film that were really hard to actually hear. So and it's very dialogue driven. There's all of these scenes of where it's basically people sitting around a table. It's a very slow movie, but again, it's so well crafted. But there are tons of scenes of where you're essentially people are sitting around a table eating or drinking something and talking. That's really mainly how you are getting the information. So it was really hard when I felt that something was off with the sound, and so it was at times painful because I felt like I was missing what was transpiring because of the audio things that were going on. I didn't know what was going on. I've looked into it and I've heard reviews of this film, Killers of the Flower Moon, and other people have commented that they experienced the same thing. So I don't know if it was actually an intentional thing by Scorsese. It's really kind of strange. But I do really want to see it on Blu-ray and see if it is still an issue, because I know when I saw it, I definitely missed some significant parts, and so it was a little bit frustrating. But overall, I was lost in the film and really thought it was incredibly powerful, and I thought it was just awesome. But I do want to see it again because of that, especially that. But today is yet another video in my continuing coverage of all of the Scorsese films. He is one of my all-time favorite directors. Not only is he, one of my favorite directors, but I also feel he is, I don't know, kind of one of my idols, somebody I really look up to. Just I feel like he's such an inspiring figure because of his knowledge of film and filmmaking. Listening to him talk is just always, I feel like a free education in film and filmmaking. I also, his work ethic is just, unlike anyone else. And what I'm probably most inspired by with Martin Scorsese is his kind of high quality work, just like the the level of consistency throughout his body of work. I just think that's really really inspiring. And being an artist, from an artist perspective, it's really hard to kind of maintain that. It's really hard to hold on to your vision and have things come from a like sincere source, and to hold like a certain kind of standard throughout your body of work. It's very very hard. And I know for me personally, it's being that what I try to do in my life as an artist. I know for me, like with my music and things that I work on, which I've always tried to make, and especially the last 8 years or so, I try to make that the priority, especially with my band Quantum. So I always have this idea of, it's twofold. One, on one level, it's where I want to always try to do something a little bit different, and try to, I like the idea of reinventing things, and not getting comfortable. And then the other thing is to try to bring about something of where, maybe amassing, and again, it's small peanuts, but maybe amassing a body of work that people will look back to or want to listen to, and maybe give a sense of where it's at least pretty consistent, and it might be very different from one thing to the next, one album to the next, but what I strive to do is to have a some kind of consistent flow. So you you know the listener can maybe get this kind of consistent feeling of listening to the work, because there's a conscious idea or around trying to always pushing, where I'm trying to hopefully push myself and try to keep up that you know that kind of standard of to some degree of the quality of the work. And for me, it's like I totally get that inspiration from filmmakers like Scorsese, when I see how it's incredibly hard to put out your own work and your own vision, and then when you actually do, and you take that leap of faith, and it's you've given birth to that baby, and then I think after that first step, I feel, is the hardest step. When you first, that the level of trepidation and the great kind of unknown is the hardest part. I do feel like people who are creative or who are in the arts, whether they're directors, filmmakers, writers, dancers, whatever it is, when they do, I think, have a thing of where they're presenting their first like original work to the world, I think the process to a degree gets easier, because you've like given birth to that first child. So you've gone through that process, which I feel is the hardest thing. And it's a lot of artists struggle with that, and it's something I know a lot of artists that are incredibly talented, but they don't have that first thing that they've put out. They don't have that initial calling card, because there is so many. It's incredibly hard. It's emotionally taxing, financially it's taxing, but it's a hard thing to kind of like have something that you feel represents your mind at that time or that period of your life, and then just letting it go and just putting it into the space and just seeing what happens, whether it's a good situation or a bad situation. But it's taking that journey. And I think after you do that, the process is always hard. Obviously, it's a lot of work. But I think when an artist does that, and then you pursue that, the process in regards to that of like being able to detach yourself from something when you feel it's done, gets that part of it gets significantly easier, and a lot easier. And with Scorsese, his inspiration is really for me a big part of that. Just how that process works, and always looking at his incredible body of work and just how everything is so high level, and there's always this consistency to his work. So it's just that part is just amazing. So today's show is going to be on a film which is the first movie he Scorsese has done two collaborations with the iconic, one of the greatest actors ever, and that is, of course, Daniel Day Lewis, one of the greatest actors of his generation. He unfortunately kind of retired from acting a few years back. His last movie that he did was, I believe, a Phantom Thread, with that was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who did There Will Be Blood, which is just one of my favorite movies of all time. And that starred Daniel Day Lewis. And he also did The Phantom Thread, which came out probably about 5 years ago or so. I have to check, but it's been out for a while. And that movie is actually a really, really good movie. So different from their previous collaboration, but such a great film. And he pretty much, after that film came out, Daniel Day Lewis had pretty much announced that he was done making films. So, you know, and he's still young, so it was a shock really. But one of the greatest actors of his generation, and he's also done some incredible work with Martin Scorsese. Um, the today's film is going to be The Age of Innocence, which was the first film he ever did, and then he went on to also star in the Gangs of New York with Daniel Day Lewis and also Leonardo DiCaprio, which is another movie I will be doing a review on. But The Age of Innocence is kind of the epitome of a movie of that's a period piece, but it's just done in such an exquisite way. It's a beautiful movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I don't own it, but I there was a period where I did see it quite a few times, and it's a beautiful movie. It came out in 1993, and it's a real big departure, I think, for Scorsese. It's not a violent crime saga about the dark underbelly of the mafia world. It's a very different film. It's a period piece. It's really more or less a melodrama, but it's an incredible movie. And it marked the first collaboration between Scorsese and Daniel Day Lewis. The basic synopsis of The Age of Innocence is it's a story set in the 1870s in New York, and it tells a story of Newland Archer, a young lawyer engaged to marry virginal socialite May Wieland. When she meets her cousin, Countess Ellen Olschenke, a woman unbound by convention and surrounded by scandal. It's a and again, this film is just such a great example of a period piece, and the level of detail in this film is just gorgeous, and it's really a character study. It's a quiet movie, it's a slow movie, but it's really at its core, at its heart, it's a melodrama, and it marks a very different area for Scorsese. I feel overall he is. Most people look at him as being a filmmaker that tells tales of crime and the dark underbelly of American society. But he does have a body of work that is really extensive, and where he will take some creative chances and will not always play within that mold that sometimes people think of him. I think movies like Kundun, which is about the Dalai Lama, is a film which is very, very different. Silence, which I just did a show on, an amazing film, kind of a movie about spirituality and religion, very very different. And then of course another movie that was easily his most controversial movie, The Last Temptation of Christ. Also, which I'm very excited about doing a show on, and then The King of Comedy with Robert De Niro. So he has really, I think Scorsese has, and even Shutter Island, which is an incredibly different, a very different film for him, which I feel like is a movie where he kind of ventured into the horror genre. But he's mostly most known as a director of like mafia movies, basically. But he has a real varied background, and I think The Age of Innocence is an incredible example of that. It's a beautiful, a really exquisite portrayal of a particular time in history. It's a beautiful period piece, and it's essentially a melodrama, and it really deals with the film. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it does really deal with societal norms and constraints. It talks about. I think it gets into you know repression that people have in society and how different generations grow around it and how those things change socially, like to a degree, what's like socially acceptable and whatnot. And it does tackle class, economics, all those things. But it's a beautiful movie, and I don't own it. I've mentioned before I don't. There's quite a few Scorsese movies. As huge, such a massive fan of him, and there's a lot of his films I don't own, and I do need to get them on Blu-ray. I have a handful of his films, and it's kind of a shame that I don't have more. But that's something I need to remedy, and at some point I will get a lot of these films. I think you know I actually think a film like because it's such an amazing period piece with the set design, I think The Age of Innocence would be a pretty spectacular movie on Blu-ray. I've only seen it. I've seen it on TV a bunch of times, and I've rented it a bunch of times over the years on DVD. I've never seen it on Blu-ray. Did not see it on the big screen, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing that film. Gangs in New York is another film I haven't seen in years. I did remember seeing that in the theater. That would be incredible to see on Blu-ray. So eventually, at some point, I will pick those up. But definitely check out this movie, The Age of Innocence. It's just just an incredible movie. It's just another example of the masterwork of Martin Scorsese, and this came out in 1993. So, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.